The original ending, I understand, to that story about Ukko and the bread that Catherine told is that he turns the woman into a woodpecker so that she will be cursed to spend the rest of her days working very, very hard to get small amounts of food, pecking away at the trees. There is something about the humbling need of survival, of searching for, of questing after nourishment that brings us into, hopefully it's not just a punishment. There is a deeper communion there that she gets to experience. There's another story of a god I wanted to tell you today. It's about the god Shiva in the Hindu tradition. Shiva once wanted to leave it all behind. He was just so sick of all of this cooking and eating and the growing of food and preparing it and all the worldly needs. But let's be done with it all these complicated, messy relationships you have to deal with in order to have all this worldly, bodily stuff. He said, what all this attachment to the body? Surely I should be able to survive on spirit alone. And so he goes up to the top of his mountain and closes off to the world. And of course, when Shiva, the god, goes to the top of the mountain, closes off to the world, bad things happen. The whole world starts turning upside down. He imposes tariffs, big tariffs, indiscriminately, every border. Nobody can get along anymore. Goods stop flowing. Oh, it's a mess. But Shiva is going to be fine because Shiva's a god sitting on top of his mountain. But after meditating there for weeks on end, even the god, gets hungry. And he becomes so desperate in the story that he begins to look for his wife, who has taken the form of Annapurna, the goddess of nourishment. And she's not too happy with this God who's set himself apart from all the world. But when he humbles himself before her and begs for nourishment, being the goddess of all good things of the earth, she provides and feeds him, and the earth begins to be restored to balance. There's something in that moment of desire to go hive off from the world that I've known myself. Have you been there? Have you tried to leave it all behind, to get away from this yoke of responsibility to our interdependent web? I remember the first time I really came into crisis with this. I was 17 years old, and I've told you before, I've had these episodes of real extreme mental health crisis. I was in a psychosis and mania. And I recognize now that part of what was driving me there was that weight of responsibility, feeling like I held the whole world's suffering on my shoulders, that I was responsible to do something about all of it. And I had a moment of profound surrender, like what I imagine Shiva had before humbling himself before Annapurna, a moment of release. And it didn't change everything. I'm still working on that journey. In fact, I was reminded of it when Paul Hudson, just a couple weeks ago, we were having that workshop with Liz James from the UU Hysterical Society after the service. And she was, I just caught the tail end, but she'd led us into some conversation about different forms of religious guilt. People were talking about their, the shades of Catholic guilt and the shades of Jewish guilt, and which is to be distinguished from Jewish guilt. But Paul mentioned that it's not so much those of us who grow up Unitarian Universalists, it's not so much guilt, a sort of religious shame and guilt that we inherit, but rather a responsibility, a sense that we are responsible for all of the world's suffering, and all the world's problems are ours to handle. And it's an aggrandized form of the humanist thread in our tradition that takes more interest in the powers and capabilities of human beings than in our vulnerabilities. And so I think one of the growing edges of our tradition is to take as seriously our vulnerability, our powerlessness, as our capabilities to help and heal and transform the world. So with all of that weight of the world responsibility that I'd figured out how to take onto my own shoulders, and of course it's a much more complicated story than that, but that was there, and I'm still working with it. But in that moment, I had a realization that I needed to surrender. And so what I did was take off all of my clothes and walk naked out into my college campus. And soon enough, I was picked up by the campus security and taken to the mental health unit of first the campus and then the hospital nearby. But through all of that, I had a profound sense of release, of surrender to a wider whole that was carrying me, of being held in a love that would not let me go. It was a profound moment of grace for me. And I think that we are all, especially these days, in need of grace like that, a grace that can be the balm on our moral injury. This idea of moral injury, if you heard this, a sense of our own moral selves being injured by being complicit in events that conflict with our own values. And especially for those of us who feel that sort of over-grand sense of responsibility and our power and agency in the world, this is a moment when we can feel that kind of moral injury. We know that it is not just those in power who do atrocic things, who commit atrocities. I like atrocic, maybe we'll hold on to that. It's not just those in power who commit atrocities. It's all of us being complicit in their unfolding, right? So we feel that weight, that moral injury of what's unfolding by the government that supposedly represents us. Dietrich Bonhoeffer, the Lutheran pastor who did so much powerful work to guide his people and ended up losing his life during World War II to the Nazis, he talked about this as the difference between cheap grace and costly grace. And communion can be a kind of a cheap grace if we let it. It can be a way of feeling better just by receiving something from on high, by receiving the atonement of someone else's suffering to wash away our own complicity. Instead, Bonhoeffer asks us to look for a more costly grace. And I think of the grace of the widow who Elijah went to. God sent Elijah to a widow to be fed. And the widow was poor, she was alone with her child, and she had just a little bit of flour left, the story says. But when Elijah showed up saying God had sent him to her to be fed, she shared what tiny bit of flour she had, this costly grace of sharing her own meager portion with this stranger. And I imagine her heart breaking for what was not given to her own child, but breaking open by sharing, by deciding to place faith in this mysterious reciprocity. And the story says, indeed, she was in the end fed. Remember the early days of the pandemic, looking for something to hold on to, something to be nourished by as I was getting divorced, and I didn't know what I could hold on to nourish me, what bread was available, my heart breaking. And I learned a lesson that I think we all have to learn over and over again. It's one that conscious uncoupling, Catherine Woodward Thomas talks about as this choice that we're faced with when we are confronted with heartbreak. That we can either harden our hearts, try and protect ourselves with more armor from the world hurting us again, or we can let our hearts break open and grow our love big enough to hold that brokenheartedness. I was walking down the street in Berkeley thinking about this one day as I was just starting to see my now wife, Caitlin, and I came across, there was one of those free piles all over Berkeley. You know the free piles. I love free piles. So I got down and there was a framed picture, this beautiful gold frame over Chinese characters. And it was subtitled there for me. It said, "Heart open equals good times." I explained that the Chinese phrase for having good times is two characters. It's heart and open. To have good times, even in hard times, means feeling it all. Means keeping our hearts wide enough open to grieve, to feel the anger and the fear, but also to enjoy what is good, to be blessed by the nourishment that we provide with one another and that is provided to us by the earth. So I want to leave you with this poem, a favorite poem by the Caribbean poet Derek Walcott. He says, "The time will come." This is that faith, that grace that comes. "The time will come when, with elation, you will greet yourself arriving at your own door, in your own mirror. And each will smile at the other's welcome and say, 'Sit here, eat.' You will learn to love the stranger that is yourself. Give wine, give bread, give back your heart to yourself. To the stranger who has loved you all your life, whom you have ignored for another who knows you by heart. Take down the love letters from the bookshelf, the old photographs, the desperate notes. Peel your own image from the mirror. Sit. Feast on your life. May it be so, and amen.